Good morning to the two of you. And we are very happy to have the OECD joining us this morning because you're a very important player in the area of sustainability and also in the area of changes in public administration. You're doing a lot of research. You have the OPSI, which is gathering the best practices from public administration from all over the world. And you are, of course, always with your nose ahead of others in order to show the pathway and to help us understand the big trends and how to deal with it. So I would like to give the floor to the two of you for your keynote: sustainability in public administration, neglected issue or priority theme. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marga, and good morning, everyone. We had a few slides, so if someone could project them, please. As Marga mentioned, my name is Tatyana Teplova, and I'm heading the OECD division on policy coherence for the SDGs in the OECD Public Governance Directorate. And it really is indeed my great pleasure to address you on this important topic of sustainability in public administration. And of course, we all know that our discussions today are taking place in a challenging global context. Countries are still struggling to recover from the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and geopolitical conflicts in Europe, but also elsewhere, threatening the safety and well-being of people around the world. The current refugee crisis, the increasing energy prices, threats to global food security, all of these challenges require governments to take collective and coordinated action to overcome these immediate challenges, but also not to lose sight of long-term sustainability commitments such as the 2030 agenda and the Paris Climate Agreement. And as such, addressing these complex issues indeed calls for strong institutions as well as for much stronger capacity of individual civil servants, which is, of course, at the heart of this event. So if we go to the next slide, please. So as you see, the presentation will be divided into two main parts. We will begin by looking at the critical role of institutional mechanisms and civil servants' skills for enhancing policy coherence in SDG implementation. And then I will give the floor to my colleague, Karina Lindberg, to illustrate how we have been working with the countries in practice to build capacity for more coherent implementation of the sustainability commitments and the SDG agenda in particular. So next slide, and then next, so then next again. Yes, so basically, why do we need policy coherence for sustainable development? Let me stress by, let me start by stressing that delivering on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, is, first of all, an enormous governance challenge for countries at all levels of development. And this also concerns all of OECD member countries as well. It requires governments to coordinate, consult and work across policy areas in an unprecedented manner. It also calls for the strategic use of such government tools as budget, procurement, regulations, but also to facilitate the design and implementation of innovative and forward-looking policies and programs. And when we've done the analysis of the countries' voluntary national reviews, it became quite clear that enhancing policy coherence for sustainable development, or what we call PCSD in the OECD context, is one of the greatest challenges in this regard. It entails, first of all, fostering synergies and minimizing trade-offs across all sectoral policy areas. It also calls for aligning domestic policy objectives with internationally agreed agendas, such as the SDG agenda, always mentioned, Paris Climate Agreement. And then also it calls for addressing transboundary and long-term effects of these policies. An experience from OECD countries has also shown that the effects of policies here and now, elsewhere and later, also dependent on the underlying processes through which those policies are designed and implemented. So this means that the systems, structures, and tools used by governments to manage and coordinate policy at all levels really matter. So if we go to the next slide, so here the OECD Council recommendation on PCSD, so again, policy coherence for sustainable development, aims to provide a comprehensive standard to help countries equip policymakers with the necessary institutional mechanisms to address these integrated challenges and accelerate progress towards the SDGs. It is also the culmination of more than 20 years of lessons learned in promoting policy coherence. So the recommendation outlines 8 guiding principles, which are organized into 3 different pillars. First is a strategic vision for the implementation of the 2030 agenda, which should be underpinned by a clear political commitment and leadership to enhance PCSD. Second pillar is effective and inclusive institutional and governance mechanisms in order to address policy interactions across different sectors and align actions across the levels of government. And the final pillar is a set of responsive and adaptive tools to anticipate, assess, and address domestic, transboundary, and long-term impacts of policies. At the same time, while of course these pillars are really crucial for progress, they are not enough on their own. Governments also need to ensure that their institutions are equipped with the adequate human resources. And here I would like to stress that, of course, we all know that in today's fast-changing world, a professional, capable and responsive public service is more important than ever in order to deliver value and drive citizens' trust in public institutions. So civil servants at all levels and in all institutions need to obtain skills that take them beyond their traditional operational environment and operating environment, and really challenge them to think and also act in new and cross-disciplinary ways. They will also need to learn skills to apply different new tools that also a representative of European Commission was talking about at the beginning of this event, and also apply new methods to in systems thinking or experimental policy design, which are all really necessary in order to be able to effectively deliver on the sustainability commitments. So if we go to the next slide. So more specifically, the OECD has mapped 4 broad clusters of skills that can underpin high-performing civil service, and that can really be brought to bear for more effective implementation of the Sustainable Development Agenda. First is policy advisory skills. In order to use technology and a broad range of perspectives to provide timely and evidence-informed advice to political decision makers. Second is engagement skills. Here, these types of skills are necessary to work with citizens, with businesses, with associations and other groups to improve services and to co-create solutions that indeed can work for everyone. Next is commissioning skills. These skills are necessary to design and use different types of contracts to access services and help implement policy. And finally, network management skills with a view to developing a shared understanding of common policy challenges through communication and trust building with different stakeholders. So these different skill requirements are driven by various forces, and they were mentioned by speakers before me. We all recognize, of course, increasingly complex service delivery landscapes, technological change and digitalization, but also a push for more open, for more innovative governments, which also in turn means that civil servants are expected to incorporate inputs from citizens and other actors at all stages of the policy cycle. And here I just would like to mention that in this context, the OECD work on public service leadership and capabilities provides a framework, normative framework for public administrations to review and develop